Well, it's my turn now to have a Saab story. This car was driving fine. I bought it about a year ago, and it's an 86 SPG, Saab 900 Turbo SPG, and went out to start it one day, and the oil pressure light did not go out. So got started digging in and trying to diagnose it, and take you to the beginning. Okay, so I'm in here in my 86 Saab 900, and you can see I've got a oil temperature light on, and it stays on even after I run it. So I've been told that the oil temperature or the oil pressure switch tends to go bad. So let's get underneath the hood and see if we can swap that out and take care of that light. Okay, so the oil pressure switch is right here. So it sits right on top of where the oil filter goes. So I'm going to go ahead and just unplug these two wires and then get a socket on that, and then I've got a couple to replace them with. So let's see if that fixes the problem. Okay, so I've got the old one out, and what you need is a deep well 24 millimeter socket. Doesn't need to be an impact, but it's the only one that I had that was that deep and that big. So once you get that, I used a couple of wobble adapters just to get myself plenty of clearance to get in. So let me put the new one in and we'll start the car up and see if that fixes the problem. All right, so unfortunately the oil light is still on even after changing the sensor. So I'm gonna try a couple things to see if we can kind of fix that problem. So the first thing is I replaced the sensor. So the first thing they said to do is turn it on and then pull the wire from the sensor to see if the light goes out, so you can tell if the sensor is working or not. So let me try that. Okay, so the car is still off, but I pulled the wire from the sensor, and now you can see the light is off. So it's not a sensor issue, or it's not a sensor wire issue. So I've got a oil pressure kit that I purchased, so I'm gonna go ahead and try that and see if we're getting any pressure reading at all. Okay, so I picked up this engine oil pressure test kit, and so you just open it up, and basically I find the right adapter, and I unscrew the oil pressure sensor that I replaced down there with one of these adapters, and then we start the car, and then we measure to see if we're getting any oil pressure. So let me get that hooked up and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so with a couple of adapters, you can see that the hose and the gauge is now connected. So let's crank it over and see what kind of reading we're getting. Okay, so according to this, I'm getting zero pressure. So I'm gonna shut the engine off now. So, all right, so now we know that we're definitely getting zero pressure. So now I gotta find out why. What I might do is there's a oil pressure release valve underneath the car. So we're gonna jack it up, see if that's stuck in the closed position. Sometimes it gets a little debris in there. And while we're at it, we'll probably just do an oil change and see if we can get some oil pressure back. So be back in a bit. Okay, so I've got the car jacked up, and one of the things I read on the forums was to check the pressure relief valve for my oil. And so you got to get underneath the car, jack it up, and I'm gonna try and see if I can pinpoint it for you guys. So you can see it through the transaxle opening, and it's, let me get a light on it. If you look through there, you can just see it right there, right in the center of the screen there. Let me see if I can point it out with a screwdriver. So it's I think it's that one right there. Let me get a light on it. So it's that bolt right there where the screwdriver's pointing. So I'm gonna see if I can access it through here with a couple wobble extensions, but you can also get to it from underneath the car. It's super oily under here, but you can kind of see where my screwdriver is pointing. So that's the oil relief valve. I'm gonna take it out, clean it, put it back in, do an oil change, and oil and filter change, and see if that solves my low pressure warning light on the car. Okay, so after finagling with a stubby 17-inch open-ended wrench, I was able to get the cap off, and then the pressure relief valve. This spring will come out, and then you need one of these little sort of flexible magnetic things, and that'll pull it right out. So let me go ahead and clean this up. I mean, it looks pretty clean, but they're saying there's some, if it gets some debris on it, that's what's going to cause it to get no oil pressure. So let me clean this up, put it back in, do an oil change, and see if that fixes the problem. Okay, so got it back on, and the way that spring's kind of strong to try to put that cap back on. So what I did is through this drive shaft access hole, I pushed a screwdriver to get some tension on the head of that nut, and then, or bolt or cover, whatever it is, and then I started spinning it. And once it catches, it screws in pretty tight, and then I use that 17 stubby to get it tight. So that's the pressure relief valve inspected and cleaned and reinstalled. So now I'm going to do an oil change, and we'll start the car up and hopefully get some oil pressure. Okay, so just finished doing a quick oil change, and I learned this trick on somewhere online, but if you take a just a plastic cup and put it underneath the oil filter as you're draining it, or as you're taking it off, you actually get it out pretty clean, and all the oil goes into the cup instead of onto the rails down there. So putting everything back together, and gonna try to start it up, see if I cured my no pressure situation. So let's get inside the car and start it up. All right, so I'm still not getting any oil pressure. So somebody suggested getting a borescope and stuffing it down different areas like the oil pump, see if I'm getting any suction pickup. So I'm going to try and blow some compressed air through a couple different passages, see if I just have a clog somewhere, but also try out this wireless endoscope and see how it works. So we'll give it a try. Okay, so here's a video using the borescope inside the pressure relief valve, and the resolution's not that great, and even though there's a light at the tip, it's not showing up enough light here, but it looks pretty clean, so I don't think that there's anything stuck inside the opening, so it's got to be something else. Okay, so another suggestion that somebody had was to prime the oil pump, and how you do that is you get in here and you remove the oil filter housing, and then there will be two ports in here. See if I can get in here and get you a better view. So there's a port kind of back there that goes to your cylinder head, and then there's a port to the right of it. Let me see if I can get a better shot here. Over to the right on this side, and that goes back to the back of your engine to the oil pump. So I'm gonna squirt a little bit of oil in there, prime it up until it's dripping out, then button everything back up and see if we can build up some pressure. Okay, so I've just got one of these little cheapy little oil cans you can find at Harbor Freight, costs a few bucks, and filled it up with engine oil. And I'm gonna go ahead and squirt it in here. I may need two hands, so I may not be able to capture all this on video. So let me come back. So you can see that oil's just starting to leak out on the right-hand side. Let me see if I can get something to point it out. So it's, you wanna squeeze oil into there, and as it's just starting to dribble out, that means it's primed. So let me button everything back up, put the oil filter, fill up the oil filter, put the oil filter back on, and see if we can get a little pressure. All right, back at it. On the forums, somebody suggested that I blow compressed air through the oil filler and use that, and then crank the engine at the same time to see if that will prime the oil pump a little bit better than squirting oil down the tube like I did the oil filter housing like I did last time. So let me go ahead and try that. I'm out here in the garage by myself, so it's a little hard to crank the engine, but I remembered I had this remote starter, and what you do is one end, the red end, you clip to the battery post, positive battery post, and then this end you just stick on the ignition switch part of your starter. So the starter motor is just right down there. So it's just, here's the oil filler cap, here's the throttle cable, and then the starter is right there. So the yellow end, that yellow wire is where I want to clip on this black piece, and then the red wire from this remote starter goes to your battery cable. And so basically what you're doing is you're touching this point with the battery, and that will trigger your solenoid, which will allow you to start the car. So let me go ahead and try that, and then hook it up, and then I'll show it to you once it's done hooking up. Okay, so you can see that I've got the black wire hooked up to where the yellow wire that I unplugged would normally go, and then I've got the red wire all the way connected to the positive battery terminal. So now what you got to do is go in, turn the ignition to the on position, the accessory position like you would have with your radio on, and then when I hit this, it'll start the car. So this is going to be a two-hand operation, so I don't know that I can show it, but I've got my compressed air here, and so I'm going to take this out, put a rag around it so I can try and get a tight seal, and then we'll go ahead and put some compressed air down there and see if we can get any oil pressure. I've got my mechanical oil pressure gauge right here. So let's give that a try, and I'll come right back. Okay, so I tried it a couple times, pushing compressed air through the oil dipstick tube, and tried cranking the car to see if it would prime the oil pump, to see if I would get any pressure. And unfortunately, still zero pressure. So my next step is I'm gonna overfill the oil. So it's got about, this normally takes about 4.5 quarts. I put 5 in there. I'm gonna add a couple more quarts, and what that should do is raise the oil level above the oil pickup tube. And if I get pressure, that means the O-ring around the oil pickup tube to the oil pump has failed. And if that's the case, then we're gonna need to pull this engine. So let me put some extra oil in there, and we'll crank it and see what happens. Okay, it looks like I've got pressure, so I'm using again my remote starter, and as you could hear, you could see, I'm getting oil pressure now. So let me turn off the car and I'll explain what happened. Okay, so as you saw, I started getting oil pressure after I added 2 extra quarts of oil to the crankcase. So what that did is, again, the maximum level is supposed to be 4.5 quarts. It's maximum capacity. And I put in 5 plus 2 more, 7 quarts, which raised the oil level about 2-3 inches above the maximum line on the dipstick. And what that did is that raised the oil level within the crankcase past where the oil pickup tube connects to the oil pump in the back of this engine. And so what that means is that O-ring has failed and it's not creating enough seal for the oil to get enough pressure to build up and go through the rest of the engine. So unfortunately, dropping the oil pan on this car is not as easy as a normal car because the bottom of the oil pan is the transmission. So this is an engine out service in order to separate the engine from the transmission. That's a unique thing about Saab. So what I'll have to do is find some time and space to pull this motor completely, then drop the transmission and then replace that O-ring that goes from the oil pickup tube to the oil pump, and probably replace some oil seals, change my belts, do a lot of other things. But for the time being, this project is on hold. So I'll get back to you guys when I can start taking this motor out and finding the time and space to do it, because my garage is a little cramped.